History remembers empires by their victories. But the Valorian Empire was born from a failure, from a night so brutal. Even the stars disappeared behind smoke, and from a boy the world believed would never matter. The attack began without warning. No horns, no declaration of war, only fire falling from the sky. Burning arrows pierced rooftops as sleeping families woke to screams instead of sunrise. Within moments, the peaceful settlement of Edrath became a battlefield. Raiders flooded the streets, fast, merciless, practiced. They were not conquering, they were erasing. Amid the chaos stood Aelor, 16 years old. No armor, no title, just a witness to the end of everything he knew. People ran past him in terror, but Aelor didn't move. His eyes followed the invaders carefully, almost unnaturally calm. He noticed something others couldn't. The attackers weren't stronger. They were organized. Each group moved with purpose. One burned homes, one blocked escape routes, another hunted defenders. It was strategy, and strategy was winning. At the northern gate, the villagers made their last stand. Leading them was Cailan, Aelor's father. Old scars covered the man's arms, reminders of wars fought for kings who never remembered his name. Yet he fought again, not for glory but for time. Every strike pushed enemies back. Every second allowed more villagers to escape. When Cailan saw Aelor watching, he shouted across the flames, "Do not fight for revenge. Fight to build something that lasts." The words confused Aelor, but he would understand them soon. Moments later, the gate shattered. Enemies poured through like a storm breaking a dam, and the defender line disappeared beneath steel. The world became quiet after fire finishes its work. By morning, Edrath was gone. Smoke drifted through ruins where laughter once lived. Survivors searched endlessly for loved ones, calling names that echoed back unanswered. Aelor walked through ashes slowly. No anger, no tears, only questions. Why had no kingdom protected them? Why did rulers claim power yet abandon their people? Why did strength always belong to those willing to destroy? He stopped where the village banner once stood. Nothing remained except a broken spear buried in the ground. And in that silence, an idea formed. Dangerous, impossible, necessary. If kingdoms failed people, then a new kind of empire must rise. 3 days later, the survivors prepared to leave separately. Fear told them survival meant hiding. Aelor stepped forward. "You will die alone," he said calmly. They laughed at him. A boy speaking like a commander sounded ridiculous, until he began predicting exactly how the raiders would return. He mapped attack paths in the dirt, explained formations none of them had considered, showed hunters where to position themselves and blacksmiths how to turn tools into weapons. People stopped laughing, because for the first time since the attack, someone had a plan. That night, a small group stayed, not because Aelor ordered them, because hope had quietly returned. They trained in silence beneath freezing winds. Farmers learned discipline. Hunters learned coordination. Survivors slowly became soldiers. And without realizing it, they were witnessing the first breath of something history would one day fear. Far beyond the mountains, kings still argued over borders and gold. None of them knew a greater threat had already begun. Not an army, not a crown, but an idea. Unity. Empires are not born when a king takes a throne, but when people decide they will never kneel again. The cold did not forgive weakness. 3 nights after the fall of Edrath, snowstorms swallowed the ruins, covering ashes as if the world itself wanted to forget what had happened there. But Aelor refused to forget. While others slept, he studied the land, hills, frozen paths, narrow passes between rocks. Every detail mattered now, because he knew something the survivors still hoped was untrue. The raiders would return, not for revenge, for certainty. They would come back to make sure no one survived. The group was small, barely 30 people. A farmer who had never held a sword, a hunter missing 2 fingers, a blacksmith whose strength came from labor, not war, and a few broken soldiers who had lost faith in kings long ago. They were not an army, yet Aelor trained them like one. He divided them into roles. Strength alone loses battles, he said. Order wins them. Hunters became archers placed on high ground. Farmers learned shield formations using wooden planks. The blacksmith reshaped farming tools into crude spears. At first, they failed constantly. Lines broke, timing collapsed, fear returned. But Aelor never shouted. He corrected, adjusted, observed. Slowly, strangers began moving together, and something new appeared in their eyes. Purpose. On the fourth morning, tracks appeared in the snow. Horses. Many of them. The raiders had returned exactly as Aelor predicted. Panic spread instantly among the survivors. Some wanted to flee, others prepared to fight recklessly. Aelor raised his hand. "Running now guarantees death," he said calmly. "Standing together gives us a chance." The words were simple, but confidence is contagious. They took their positions. Hidden archers climbed frozen ridges. Fighters waited behind broken wagons, forming a narrow defensive path. Beneath fresh snow, traps waited silently. The raiders entered laughing. To them, this was cleanup, an easy victory. The first arrow changed everything. It struck the lead rider before he understood danger existed. Then another, and another. Confusion spread through the invaders as horses panicked and formations collapsed. They charged forward blindly, exactly as Aelor expected. When they reached the narrow pass, the defenders locked shields together. For the first time in their lives, farmers stood like soldiers. Spears struck in rhythm. Traps snapped beneath charging feet. The raiders, stronger individually, found themselves trapped inside discipline they could not break. The battle ended faster than anyone imagined. The survivors stood breathing heavily, staring at enemies retreating into the storm. They had done the impossible. They had won. Silence followed, not celebration, disbelief. One of the older soldiers approached Aelor slowly. "You planned this, knowing we could win?" Aelor shook his head. "No," he replied quietly. "I planned it so we would not lose." That answer spread among them faster than victory itself, because it sounded like something a king would say. That night, they gathered around a fire built from the remains of their old homes. Someone asked a question none had dared speak before. What are we now? Not refugees, not villagers. Something else. Aelor walked to the broken spear, still standing in the frozen ground. The last remnant of Edrath. He tied a torn crimson cloth around its tip. The fabric moved with the wind, glowing against the dark sky. "We are no longer waiting for protection," he said. "We will become it." The group watched the banner rise. No crown marked it. No symbol yet existed. Only a color, deep crimson, the color of sacrifice and survival. And in that moment, a name was spoken for the first time. Valoria. Far away, beyond mountains and kingdoms, messengers carried rumors north and south. Stories of survivors defeating trained raiders. Stories of a young leader gathering followers. Kings ignored the rumors, but generals listened. Because history had taught them one truth. Every empire begins small, and if ignored long enough, it becomes unstoppable. That night the world gained a new banner, and unknowingly a future enemy. The fire of victory did not warm the survivors. It only illuminated how fragile they truly were. The crimson banner of Valoria waved in the frozen wind, a symbol of hope for the desperate. Yet in the hearts of some, fear lingered. The victory over the raiders had been small, a test, and the world outside their mountains was vast, cruel, and unforgiving. Aelor knew this, but even he did not yet understand the danger that had grown within. 3 weeks had passed since Edrath's destruction. The survivors trained daily, mastering formations, weapons, and trust in each other. Aelor spent hours studying maps and observing enemy movements in the distance, predicting attacks before they happened. He was not just a boy anymore. In the eyes of his followers, he was a leader, a strategist, a visionary, a spark in a dark world. Yet leadership, he had learned, attracted more than loyalty. It attracted envy. Among the group was a former soldier named Draven, strong, confident, respected, and skilled in combat. Draven had fought for kings who abandoned him, and now he served Aelor reluctantly, though many thought he admired him. But admiration can twist into ambition, and ambition can whisper dangerous thoughts in the quiet of night. One evening, under a starless sky, Aelor gathered his people around the growing fire. "This is only the beginning," he said. "Valoria will not survive by chance. We must fight, plan, and unite. Every step we take is the foundation of an empire that cannot fall." The group murmured their agreement, eyes reflecting flickering flames. Draven smiled quietly from the back, a shadow among light. The very next day, scouts reported movement far to the south. A large army, organized, disciplined, and well-equipped, was advancing toward the northern mountains. Aelor studied the reports carefully. "They seek us," he said, "not for vengeance, but for certainty. They have heard of our victory, and they will come to destroy it." The survivors prepared for battle. Archers climbed cliffs. Spears were sharpened. Traps hidden beneath snow and stone. Every detail calculated, every move rehearsed. But unknown to Aelor, a seed of betrayal had already been planted. The first encounter was brutal. A scout was ambushed and captured by enemy soldiers. Yet the information he carried was false, deliberately misleading. Draven, the silent shadow, had warned the enemy of Valoria's weakest flank. He whispered to himself under the dark canopy of trees, "If this boy wants an empire, let him earn it, or die trying." The survivors, trusting completely in Aelor, were caught off guard. Arrows fell where they should not have. Spears blocked paths that were safe. Panic flickered through the ranks, just enough to make the enemy's advantage deadly. Aelor noticed the irregularities immediately. "Something is wrong," he muttered, his mind racing faster than his heart. He repositioned soldiers, adjusted formations, and held the line, barely. The battle ended with heavy losses, but not total defeat. The survivors retreated into the mountains, battered, cold, but alive. Yet the first taste of betrayal had left a bitter aftertaste. That night, the survivors gathered under the crimson banner once more. Aelor stood silently, staring at the fire. "The world will not forgive weakness," he said finally. "And betrayal. Betrayal is far more dangerous than any army." Draven stood in the shadows silent, but the whisper in his heart had already decided. History was no longer a distant threat. It had arrived in the form of an enemy that wore no crown, carried no sword, and yet could destroy empires from within. An empire can rise from ashes, but one shadow in the ranks can burn it all down. Tomorrow, Valoria fights not just for victory, but for survival. The mountains of the north were silent. Too silent. After the skirmish with the southern army, the survivors had retreated to hidden valleys, exhausted and wounded. Every face told the same story: doubt, fear, exhaustion. But Aelor could not allow fear to root itself. "We have survived before," he told them, "and we will survive again. Only discipline, strategy, and courage will carve the empire from these ashes." The morning sky turned blood-red. It was not sunrise. It was the signal of the enemy. Arrival, the warlord Lord Caelthorn, commanding an army larger than any Aelor had imagined. Thousands of warriors, banners snapping in the icy wind. Glinting armor catching the morning sun like fire. For the first time, Aelor understood the scale of what he had begun. "This is no longer a raid," he whispered. "This is war." He turned to his people. The survivors were tired. Some limped, some were afraid, but every eye was on him. "We fight," he said, "not because we will win easily, but because surrender is not an option. Not for us, not for Valoria." And with that, the first true army of the Valorian Empire was formed, 30 ragged fighters, armed not just with weapons, but with courage, discipline, and the memory of every life lost in Edrath. But not all hearts were loyal. Draven's shadow lingered. He had whispered to Lord Caelthorn the positions of hidden paths, secret supplies and weak points in Aelor's formation. His betrayal was calculated, precise. "A great empire is born from fire," Draven murmured, watching the horizon. "But perhaps it burns too easily." The battle began at noon. The northern defenders were outnumbered 10-1. Arrows rained from cliffs, but enemy archers fired faster. Traps slowed the advance of Caelthorn's soldiers, but the southern army adapted. They pushed, relentless, crushing the weak points that Aelor had trusted. Aelor's heart raced. Every decision mattered. One misstep and everything would be lost. Yet he fought not only with sword in hand, but with mind. "Hold the line here," he shouted, repositioning farmers turned soldiers with pinpoint accuracy. "Do not break formation. Trust each other. The tide of battle shifted in microseconds. Small victories kept the line alive. Every fallen comrade fueled the survivors' determination. But betrayal came from within. Draven struck at the exact moment a flank opened. He misdirected soldiers, exposed weak points, and whispered false retreat orders. Chaos rippled through Aelor's army. Aelor noticed immediately. His instincts screamed. "There is a shadow among us," he thought, eyes narrowing. "It is the deadliest kind." Despite the treachery, Aelor refused to retreat. He led a counterattack personally, climbing a cliff, rallying his fighters, and cutting through Caelthorn's front line. The northern survivors, inspired by his courage, fought like legends. The enemy was strong, disciplined, and merciless, but the unity of Valoria's first army, small though it was, became a storm the enemy had not anticipated. As dusk fell, the battle ended, not in complete victory, but survival. The enemy withdrew, regrouping for another attack. Many survivors were wounded. Some lay still on the frozen ground. Yet the banner of Valoria still waved in the wind. Aelor looked around. 30 warriors, 30 souls who had fought against impossible odds. "We live," he whispered. "And tomorrow, we grow stronger." But one thought haunted him. Not every enemy wears armor. In the shadows, Draven's betrayal had been only the beginning. There would be spies, traitors, enemies that could never be predicted. Aelor clenched his fists. "Let them come," he said quietly. "If they think they can destroy Valoria, they will learn that empires are forged in fire, loyalty, and blood." The first battle was won, but the real war had only begun. And every empire knows this truth. The deadliest threats are the ones who stand behind you. The dawn was merciless. Frost covered the ruins of the battlefield. The air smelled of blood and iron. Valoria's first warriors awoke to the bitter realization victory had come at a cost far higher than they imagined. 30 survivors remained, bruised, exhausted, and wary. Each one carried a story of courage, fear, or loss. And all of them now understood one undeniable truth. The world would not forgive weakness. Aelor walked among them, silent, his eyes scanning each face. Every soldier knew instinctively today was different. "We were betrayed," he said, voice low but firm. "Not by chance, not by enemy skill, but from within." Gasps spread across the small camp. Whispers began. Fear grew. He did not need to accuse anyone. The truth had been visible in the smallest details. Misdirected formations, sudden confusion during battle, and those subtle moments where the enemy seemed to anticipate their moves perfectly. Aelor's gaze settled on Draven. Strong, confident, composed, the man had hidden his duplicity behind loyalty. Until now. "Why?" Aelor asked, his voice steady but piercing. "Why betray us when we trusted you?" Draven's smirk was faint but undeniable. "Trust is a tool," he said quietly, "and empires rise or fall based on the clever use of tools. You are clever, boy, but not wise enough to see the world as it truly is." Aelor's hand brushed the hilt of his sword, but he did not strike, not yet. Strategy came before vengeance. "You will see the cost of your choice," Aelor said. "Not just to you, but to every empire that thinks it can destroy Valoria from the shadows." He gathered the survivors around the crimson banner, still tattered, still scarred from the first battles. "This flag is not just cloth," he told them. "It is the symbol of survival, of unity, of what happens when we refuse to kneel. Valoria begins today, not with kings or crowns, but with people who will fight together, smarter and stronger than anyone thought possible." The soldiers listened, silent, hearts pounding. Aelor's mind raced. He planned the next move. The southern army would return. Caelthorn would not forgive defeat, and Draven would try again, so he would not wait. That night, under the frozen sky, Aelor gathered the youngest fighters. "We strike first," he said. "We use the enemy's expectations against them. Every move we make will be calculated. Every step will matter, and every betrayal will be answered with fire." He drew maps in the snow. Lines, symbols, positions. Every detail was precise. The survivors, once ordinary villagers, now trained soldiers, followed his plan without question. "We are not just fighting for survival anymore," Aelor said, eyes glowing with determination. We are fighting for an empire that will never fall, and Valoria will rise from these ashes stronger than anyone has ever imagined. By midnight, the plan was ready. Arrows sharpened, traps set, and positions mapped with exacting precision. The first official Valorian battle strategy was complete, an elegant combination of defense, counterattack, and deception. And Draven watched from the shadows, unaware that the boy he had underestimated would soon turn every betrayal into his undoing. The first shadow has been revealed, but this is only the beginning. The world will soon learn the name of Valoria, and when it does, empires will tremble. The night was silent, too silent. Aelor stood atop a frozen hill, crimson banner of Valoria snapping in the cold wind behind him. Below, the first true army of the Valorian Empire waited. 30 souls who had survived fire, betrayal, and loss. They were no longer villagers. They were warriors. "Tonight we do not fight to survive," Aelor said. "We fight to rise." The southern army had camped unaware of the trap. Galethorn's men, confident in their previous victories, assumed Valoria was broken. They had underestimated what determination, strategy, and unity could accomplish. Aelor's plan was simple: strike where they expected least, lure them into the mountains, and use the terrain as their greatest weapon. The night erupted. Arrows rained from hidden cliffs. Traps snapped beneath charging feet. The enemy surged forward into positions they had thought safe, only to find themselves isolated, surrounded, and confused. In the chaos, Draven attempted his final betrayal. He struck at Aelor's flank, hoping to shatter the army from within. But Aelor had anticipated him. With precise timing, the trap he had set for the enemy also caught the traitor. Draven's schemes unraveled in moments, leaving him exposed. "You will learn," Aelor whispered, "that shadows cannot survive in the light of Valoria." Draven fled, humiliated, as the army of Valoria pressed forward. By dawn, the battle was over. The enemy lay defeated. Galethorn had withdrawn, vowing revenge, but the mountains themselves now bore the name of a new power. The survivors looked around, their first victory as an organized force. For the first time, the banner of Valoria stood not just as a symbol of survival, but as a beacon of an empire. Aelor raised his sword toward the rising sun. "This is only the beginning," he said. "We are no longer survivors. We are the Valorian Empire, and the world will remember our name." The soldiers knelt, touched the banner, and silently swore their loyalty. Not to a king, not to a crown, to the idea of unity, courage, and the empire that would never fall. The boy who should have died in Edrath had become something far greater, a leader, a strategist, and the spark of an empire that would shake the world. The Valorian Empire has risen from ashes, but this is only the first chapter. Shadows still lurk, enemies still plot, and battles far greater await. If you want to witness the rise of Valoria, every battle, every betrayal, every victory, subscribe now and join the Empire before history forgets it.